Hello, I'm Citrus, and it's not quite a model kit, but it is 1/144 scale, and it's the Metal Robot Spirits Zeta Plus C1 Hummingbird. Okay, and so far, just turning it around, you can see it looks pretty good. But there are a few very tiny problems. So the figure sits on the stand just fine. In fact, I can even turn it upside down, mostly, and it still stays. And it's because the two posts that hold it up clip in onto these little T-shaped pegs in there. Unfortunately, the little peg for the beam smart gun on the bottom is a little bit loose, so I'll have to tighten that up later. But when this is held up against the bottom of the Wave Rider, you can see that there's really nowhere for the handle to go. It doesn't fold backwards or anything like that. So it kind of just hangs out there. Not a big deal. And the other thing is the instructions tell you to just use the normal C1 codpiece, which is not quite correct. It's supposed to be a longer shape for the Hummingbird. You can also see here that the thing that holds the propellant tanks together doesn't really want to stay together very well, so I'm going to have to tighten the pegs for that as well. But the biggest issue with this thing is that it doesn't transform. This is it. Now, to be fair, there was absolutely nothing in any of the product photos, in any of the marketing that barely existed, or any of the literature that would have implied that this transformed in any way whatsoever. But I somehow got it in my mind that we were going to get a fully transforming Metal Robot Spirits Zeta Plus Hummingbird. So that one's entirely on me. Of course, you know, it's not, it doesn't help the disappointment that I paid almost $500 for this. Okay. Again, that also is somewhat my own fault, which I'll explain in a second once I put it back onto its base. So to make this combination, you need to buy this. Well, not this particular one, but any Metal Robot Spirits Zeta Plus. But this is the one that most recently came out. This is the A1, A2, C1, C2 version, which gives you new parts for the codpiece, the shield, the beam rifle, and let's see on the back here. There's the A2, C2 head. Yeah. So for this figure, I paid $174.67 with shipping from Nin Nin Game. I pre-ordered it through them. And the other figure that you have to buy is this. So the S Gundam Plus Booster Unit. So this is a re-release of the Task Force Alpha S Gundam plus the Booster Unit, which was a separate accessory back then, all in one package. And for this one, I paid an eye-watering $308.28 plus shipping and tax from Premium Bandai US. Now, I could have saved a little bit of money if I had also bought this from Nin Nin Game, but the day I found the listing for the S Gundam on Nin Nin Game, the cancellation window on Premium Bandai US had already closed. So I was kind of stuck paying the American premium for this, unfortunately. To be fair, this could have gone a lot worse. I could have bought the Zeta Plus from Premium Bandai US as well, where the pre-order price was $180, which, based on where I am, after tax and shipping, would have been in the region of about $210-ish. At least I saved $30. But that means that if you had bought both figures from Premium Bandai US, you would have actually paid very, very, very expensive. So let's talk about if this was worth it or not. Oh, and keep in mind that the pre-order price for the S Gundam Booster Unit was the same as the metal composite goof, which is a 1/100 scale figure. I don't know. I don't really know how pricing works for anything anymore, I guess. So there you go. So let's start with the Zeta Plus first. And let's just get it back down to its parts that you actually use to make this thing. So this is how much of the Zeta Plus that we use for the Hummingbird. Because I don't think this figure was originally designed to do this, pulling all of the limbs apart doesn't feel the best, especially as compared to the old metal composite figure, which was designed out of the box to come apart for the conversion to the Hummingbird. And if we take a look at the parts that come off, so this is just one of the booster pods from the S Gundam, and the only thing that's really missing here to make the transformation happen is to have limbs inside. So legs that come out, arms that come out, and that's pretty much it. The only feature aside from that missing from these is there's no lock down here. On the metal composite, you can flip down a little peg and it would notch into the top of the next one under it so that the two of them, when they're connected, don't move. That said, instead of there being limbs in these booster pods, they do bend like this, which is much more dynamic for Hummingbird, the Wave Rider displays, if you want to bend them out like that, and they're also more dynamic for displaying on the S Gundam itself. Oh my god, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? Ugh! Jesus Christ! Unfortunately, I forgot to take off these shoulder blocks, which came with the S Gundam booster set. And I forgot that they were incredibly hard to put on the first time around. And now I'm having a really hard time taking them off. And you can see there's painted surface on basically every other side of this piece. So if you want to get it off safely, the only way I've been able to do it is to basically take something flat and thin, kind of like the back end of a paint stirrer, and then just wedge it into the gap there and try to lever it off, and it should just come right off like that. And there you go. You can see that there's minimal damage there, although on the other side I did scratch the plastic a little bit there. Alright, so here we have the Zeta Plus A2. So let's review all the parts that have changed. First, probably the most obvious is the head. Have white stripes on the side instead of blue. These antennae are fixed, unlike on the C1 or the A1 C1 head, for which they do actually move. There is an optional collapse antenna that you can put on, although it is a little bit superfluous because when you transform this into the WaveWriter, the head is completely hidden by the nose cone, so you can just take this off in order to push it through the chest and then just leave it off and not put this on. Next, of course, is the nose cone. So this is the A1 thing that's just like a shield. Whereas this is the C1 cannon. Next you have these different cannons on the hips that have a little bit of a guard in the front. The C1 does not have this piece. They both have the gimmick to stow the beam sabers inside. There's the different cod piece, of course. And on the back, have these blanks for where the propellant tanks would have gone, and a different tail section that doesn't have the extra thrusters on it. The annoying thing about this implementation is that you have to reuse the stub piece that is used to connect to the back. And I really wish they could have just given us this whole section in one piece, because this segment in the middle is prone to falling off if you move it in some angles. And the little teeth marks you can see on the inside of that one are already kind of starting to wear out a little bit just from having changed this back maybe twice. So not the best way they could have done this, really. And in addition to all of that other stuff, there's also new metal landing gear bits. The tires are painted pretty well. The structure of the landing gear is metal, and the paint match between the painted metal and the painted plastic is pretty close. And this is the codpiece landing gear, which is all plastic. And lastly, the A1's beam rifle with a handle that stows inside like so. Attachment point for WaveWriter back there. And a hook, which is not mentioned in the instructions, because this hook doesn't really have anywhere to go on the back of the figure. You can kind of put it in like that, I guess, but it's quite loose. It doesn't really stay. So I can only assume this was a vestigial feature intended for another figure. So altogether, 3,000 yen more than the original Zeta Plus Metal Robot Spirits release. 18,000 yen for this, 15,000 yen for that one. The coloring between the two versions, as you can see, is a little bit different, which is good for collectors who have both of these so that they don't look exactly the same. I think it remains to be seen exactly what this release will have on secondhand prices, especially since these are all premium Bandai products. So hopefully the addition of this A1, A2, C1, C2 version means that the prices for all of the Zeta Pluses will go down a little bit and they'll become a little easier and cheaper to get. But if that does happen, I have a feeling that the time window for that lower price is not going to be very protracted. So if you're interested, keep your eyes sharp, and as soon as you see a listing for a good price that's probably touching 18,000 yen or so, probably consider jumping on it. And if it goes below that, definitely. And now the other half, which is the S Gundam. This was a release that I originally skipped because the S Gundam was a web exclusive as well. And since I already had the XS, I didn't really see too much of a reason to pick this up. But one of the cool things you get with this figure that you don't with the XS is this version of the Beam Smart Gun, which looks very, very beefy. Of course, if you compare it to the normal one, yeah, quite a different look. Obviously, this is in the Task Force Alpha, like red, yellow, blue colors, which is pretty cool. And the shoulders still do the splitting thing. Aside from that, you get this sub arm on the leg as an option. The legs themselves are thinner because they don't have the excess parts on them. And the back has a smaller set of boosters. On the excess here is just basically another set of the same boosters that we get with the booster unit. The coloring is also pretty similar, as you can see. Paint applications and the decals are roughly the same as well. The only difference is really these little parts here, which are white on the XS version, and they're gray here. The thrusters also have like a bluish tinge to them. Like very slightly different from, well, I guess it's almost greenish compared to the ones on the XS, but yeah, very minor color difference. Articulation for the rest of the figure is basically exactly the same, so I won't go into it in detail. But the nice thing about the S Gundam is that it is, well, a little bit easier to pose and more stable on its feet because there is so much less stuff on the back of it. You can see the ankles are pretty good at holding a decent range of angles. Not the most extreme, but definitely able to do a lot more grounded poses than you would probably feel safe dealing with the excess, just because this figure is so much easier to balance. Now if we want to put this into the booster type, here's the S Gundam BST with the booster unit. Pretty painless experience converting this from the S Gundam. If you like, you can remove one of the covers on this pod to expose this little hole for an extension that will allow you to plug the bigger beam spark gun into it, so that the arm doesn't have to hold it on its own. Although the joints in the arm are tight enough and the weapon is light enough that you really shouldn't experience any weight problems anyway. At this point, the stand is basically essential because, of course, it has no legs. And that hole right there in the backpack is where the stand would go. Unfortunately, I don't have a Task Force Alpha S Gundam or XS in order to compare the color scheme for you guys, but to my eye at least, the colors look pretty good. So the Japanese retail price of this release is 27,500 yen. When this was first released separately, the booster unit was 5,500 yen and the S Gundam was 14,000 yen. So we went from 19,500 in 2018 to 27,500 in 2024. 8,000 yen in 6 years is a pretty big jump, considering that all you're really getting are the 4 parts to let you put the 4 boosters onto a Zeta Plus. There's supposedly some paint differences between this version and the older one, like you get extra paint or something like that, but I think if you were to put this next to it, you'd be hard-pressed to be really able to tell the difference. So value-wise, I think this re-release is not quite as good of a value as the Zeta Plus A1, A2, C1, C2. That said, considering that the Task Force Alpha colors of the S Gundam and the XS Metal Robot Spirits has always commanded a bit of a premium. This, unfortunately, is probably one of the, well, more affordable ways to get into this package. Although, of course, now that this is released, I'm sure that the prices of the older releases either have dropped or will drop shortly, since this is like the more complete package. As for the whole motivation for all of this, which was the Zeta Plus Hummingbird, which unfortunately I don't have any B-roll for because I forgot to capture some before I started filming this, it's best to treat it as like a neat bonus that you get for buying both figures than as like the major motivation for you to go out and go get these two releases, because I think that is definitely the wrong way to approach this. I think you'll be a lot happier and you'll be able to enjoy your figures more if you don't expect the Hummingbird to be the main star of the show, which, as I've hopefully shown you through this, it definitely was not. It was definitely only intended to be a little small pack-in bonus. The way that you have to disassemble the Zeta Plus and put it back together is a disaster. It's so easy to scratch the paint in so many different places, and there's so many joints that you have to basically break apart and reassemble that I think were really never intended to do this. It just does not feel great. After this review, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to put my Zeta Plus back into the Hummingbird again because it's just so scary, man. Now, during the Hobby Watch interview at the announcement of these two figures, the creator did say that he had intentions to create fully transforming versions of either the S Gundam or the Hummingbird. I'll be happy if they release any of them, but on the other hand, I personally want to be kind of just done with collecting these because they're not getting any cheaper, they're not getting any easier to get. I'm kind of of two minds about this. I'm happy if this is the last ones of the Gundam Sentinel Metal Robot Spirits, because then that means my collecting is done. And on the other hand, I do want them to release more cool stuff because, hey, it's cool stuff, right? And who doesn't love cool stuff? So I hope you found this somewhat helpful. If you don't have the Hummingbird already because you didn't buy the S Gundam booster set, it's probably not really worth going out to get it. But if you wanted to get the booster set because you like it, then the Hummingbird is a nice extra on top. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.